One of the most commonly used moves in the history of chess is this bishop pin on our knight. Apparently, it's a very annoying move, since it means we can never move this knight again unless we want to lose the queen. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 ways to punish this bishop move, because it's actually pretty easy to counter, and most players don't know it. And that's not even the best part. The best part, you know what it is? That you can use this no matter what opening you play, because this pin happens in most games. For example, what happens if, just to name one, someone plays the Scandinavian defense against us? It's a pretty popular defense, especially at ratings below 2000, right? For example, we threaten the queen, it retreats, we develop the knight, and now the pin starts. This is just a sample development, okay? You might come across this in almost all your games. How important the bishop's pin on our knight is. Alright, many of you might think a good move would be to chase this bishop away with h3, so that if they exchange, the pin disappears. Of course, the bishop can always retreat and keep the pin. Well, it's an interesting plan. Another interesting plan to get rid of the pin is to play bishop to e2. Yes, all of this is great, Chestiker, but is this what you're going to teach me? Well, no. Neither of these two plans is the right one. The idea is to develop actively. For example, bishop to c4 here would be a great move, no matter that our bishop is pinned. Let me explain why. Here, the most normal thing is that they continue developing. For example, knight to c6, or for example, knight to f6. And here we would already have a clear advantage and could take advantage of this bishop that's in a really bad position. If they had played knight to c6, it would be even more spectacular and easier. Why? Because this knight isn't defending the bishop on f6, it's defending the bishop on g4. But pay attention to the following. Here we already have the advantage anyway. Bishop takes f7 is a typical and winning move when our knight is pinned like this. What are we doing? We're alluring the king out. Now, if the king simply decides to move over here and not accept the sacrifice, this game is way too easy. We could continue, for example, with knight to e5 check, and we would capture this bishop, which is attacked by 2 pieces, so black can't escape. They must, for example, capture this bishop, and now the move is exactly the same. Knight to e5 wins the game. We take advantage of the discovered attack to deliver this check and attack the bishop with 2 pieces. Do you remember I told you that if they had played knight to c6, it would have been easier? Much easier, because this knight wouldn't be defending this bishop, and we could have even jumped to this side since we could have captured the bishop with the queen. And from here, if we look at how the game would end, let's suppose these exchanges happen, we end up with an extra pawn. And not only that, but now, this game is way too easy to win. Our opponent has moved the king, so it's going to stay in the center for the whole game. We're going to castle, we're going to attack the king, and it's going to be a really comfortable game for us. We could even do it in a much more spectacular way. Instead of playing bishop takes f7, which would be an excellent sacrifice because we'd get back the bishop on g4, we could do it in a brilliant way. Play knight to e5 directly. That way, now we're attacking the bishop directly with 2 pieces, and if the bishop moves away, we could checkmate over here. Of course, a lot of your opponents will be tempted to win the queen since this bishop was pinning the knight, so when it moves, they can capture the queen. And the outcome is exactly the same. Bishop takes on f7, and thanks to the knight, this would be checkmate. Depending on the game and your position, you can choose whether to go straight for the bishop sacrifice or jump with the knight to e5 to try for checkmate. For example, a typical game e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, Italian opening, bishop to c5, knight to c3, knight to f6. A very calm, very normal game, as you can see, right? But white, for example, at this point is already trying to pin. It really doesn't matter what moves are on the board. The important thing in this video is to focus on what happens when they try to pin this knight. In this case, it's too early to try to pin it, because white should have waited until we castled the king. This way, since our king isn't castled, we have a big advantage. What is it? That we can expand our pawns and do it with total success. Burn this into your memory. When your knight gets pinned and you haven't castled, you have a great opportunity to go on the attack. We attack the bishop, and if it gets traded, that's perfect because then our queen would join the attack, targeting the knight. And our pin would actually be very effective since we'd have two pieces attacking their knight. Of course, usually when we chase this bishop away, it retreats to the h4 square, keeping up this powerful pin. But what we were saying is that now we can launch a spectacular attack with g5, and that way we're going to win the game without a doubt. Many of you, especially those who are a bit more experienced, might be wondering, can't white do the typical sacrifice of knight takes on g5, pawn takes g5, and then bishop takes g5, keeping the pin? No, they can't, and I'll explain why. Because we're not castled. Right now, they've just given us a knight in exchange for giving us even more attacking chances. So it's all good for us. We're attacking the bishop, and it's going to have trouble getting away. We're going to castle long, and we'll have open files to attack the opponent's castling. It would be a very serious mistake in this position. When we make this g5 advance, trying the capture, knight takes on g5. I repeat, this capture would work if we were castled. Alright, so here, what should the white pieces do? Well, they have no choice but to pull back this bishop. And now, pay attention, notice the difference. The bishop comes in to pin their knight. Wait, Chesterker, didn't you just tell me this wasn't a good idea? No, I didn't say that. What I'm showing you is when it's time to punish these moves. In this case, our opponent can't expand because this bishop is blocking the g-pawn. Do you see it? So there's no point in trying to chase away this bishop because it could just hide here and keep the pin going without any trouble. That's why here, white should just continue with their game. Attacking our bishop doesn't help them. And now I'm going to finish this game for you with an example, because this was a real game. And it was a super easy way to finish with the block pieces. This game is already looking really, really good for black's opponent. As you can see, I started with the first example by setting up the white pieces for you. Now, the black pieces. This means that it really doesn't matter which color we're playing. We have a big advantage if we know how to take advantage of these kinds of pins. All right, here, the player with the black pieces simply continued advancing their pawns, taking advantage of the fact that the king is castled and the king of the the player with the black pieces still isn't. Now there's a threat to advance and trap the dark squared bishop. That's why here white tried the counterplay of h4, aiming for this capture on g5, and also preventing this pawn from advancing to threaten the bishop. All right, there's no problem at all. Black continued with their attack. Is there a good pen here? Yes. Well, they keep piling on the pressure with the knight and the bishop, something that Wyatt, when they had the pin, didn't have time to deal. All right, how did the game continue? The game went on like this. Pawn takes pawn, threatening this knight. And do you think the knight left now? Now. The attack continued. h4, a wonderful move. It threatens the bishop, and not just the bishop, but also threatens to open lines for the rook. Once that rook has a clear path, attacking will be much easier. The game continued as follows. The bishop retreated, logically, and now instead of pulling back this knight, the attack continued. As you can see, this attack is so strong that we don't mind losing the knight, since we have a big advantage. And the game ended in the following way, a very simple way. Pawn takes pawn, and after king takes pawn. Simply the winning move. Bishop takes f3, check, and they'll have to give up the queen. As you can see, the game continued like this, and now this bishop can be captured anyway. There's also the threat of queen takes f6, but here the player with the white pieces logically resigned, since the lack of material caused by trying a pin at the wrong time has been devastating. I'll set up the white pieces again. d4, d5, knight to f3, knight to f6, e3, and there goes our opponent, pinning our knight. The moves I make before the pin really aren't important. What's important is that you focus on the ideas I'm giving you for when this knight here gets pinned. Now, what we can do is go on the hunt for this bishop. Careful here. Most players, I'll say it again, what do they do? Bishop to e2, playing passively because they're afraid of this kind of pin, when in reality, they could get a lot out of these kinds of moves. How could we start our hunt? It's obvious, just like in the example we just saw, we're going to play h3. In this case, we'd be super happy if they gave up the pair of bishops, right? Normally, they'll keep maintaining this pin here. All right, so what are we going to do? Play g4, which is super, super, super necessary in this case to hunt down this bishop, because now when it retreats, I repeat, the knight sacrifice would be useful for us, since we're not castled and they'd be giving us the knight for nothing. The bishop retreats, and then we'll play the move knight to e5. All right, let's evaluate this position. We're threatening to win the bishop. In fact, if we want, we can win it right now. Since this bishop can't escape anywhere, it can only come over here, but the move f3 would force it to retreat. That's why now black has to play something else. It really doesn't matter to us. The good thing about this video is that you don't have to memorize the moves. You just need to understand the ideas so you can apply them in your own games, no matter what you play. For example, let me give you an example. What happens if they play e6? Just to say something. Are we going to capture this bishop right away? No. We're going to play high five. A very good move. What it's threatening is obvious. If black gets careless now and plays, for example, knight from b to d7, we play h5 and we've won a bishop. It looks like it has a square on e4, but simply after f3, we've won this light squared bishop. That's why here the move h4 is threatening h5 and winning a bishop. Very good. I'm sure many of you are thinking, yes, but black doesn't have to play a random move. They have much better options, like h6 or h5, it really doesn't matter, to give the bishop an escape route. That's right, this is correct, but that's exactly what we were waiting for. Once they've given the bishop an escape route, now is the time, remember this well, to capture it. And this game, my friends, is pretty much decided. Not tactically, but positionally. When they recapture with the knight, our structure is so good that we can continue with bishop to d3. Queen to d3 would also be possible, but bishop to d3 is much better, targeting this point here. We're attacking a point on g6 that probably can't be defended in any way, simply by bringing the king closer. If they try to push it forward, we would simply capture with the pawn, and thanks to the rook's pin, they wouldn't be able to recapture. So now the only possible option they have is to come and defend with the king. It's clear that this position is completely winning for white. We're in a much better position. The king will never be able to castle again, and it's going to be very easy to attack. And now I'm going to show you one of my favorite ways to punish this pen. Alright, you need to understand this. When a bishop moves so far just to come bother us, what is it doing? It's moving away from its original square, which leaves weaknesses on the queen side, right? So what are we going to do? Well, now we're going to punish it in the following way. We're going to play c4. There's no way to be passive here. We have to be active. We play c4 and we're threatening something obvious to capture this pawn, leaving us with a really good center after knight to c3. Logical moves here, well, for example, maybe the best move would be e6, right? Why? Because it opens the way for their other bishop while defending the pawn we just attacked. Taking here wouldn't be a good idea because we get to develop our bishop for free, right? All right, the important thing is, what are we going to do? Well, you see how they're pinning our knight and the queen is right behind it. So we move the queen to b3. Now this knight is no longer pinned, and more importantly, we're attacking the weaknesses left behind when the bishop left its home square. Very good, we're threatening queen takes b7, and after that, threatening the rook as well. A totally natural reaction would be to play b6, for example. The thing is, now we've just added too much fuel to the fire. The queen is no longer being pinned, so the knight can move. Alright, let's move the knight over here, taking advantage of all these weaknesses that the player with the black pieces has left by being careless and trying to pin our knight when it wasn't the right time. Now the bishop is under threat. Well, the bishop isn't the problem, it can just be pulled back. So what's the big problem? Well, the big problem now is the white squares. We've managed to weaken them. Why? Because we've counterattacked on the opposite flank. For example, let me explain. Pawn takes pawn would be a tremendous move. And why pawn takes pawn? Because now we can bring in the other bishop. Once again, we're taking advantage of the weaknesses. They have to block the check. There's only one way to block it, by placing a piece on d7, since putting it here would be heavily defended by both the knight and the pawn with both pieces. So knight to b7 would be a perfectly good example, and here we'd already have a devastating move. We're pinning this knight here, putting pressure over here. What we need is to add even more pressure, and we're going to do that by playing e4, a bombshell move. Why is e4 a bombshell if we're just giving away the pawn and they can take it however they want? Well, e4 is a bombshell because it attacks the bishop, attacks the pawn, and most importantly, it opens up this diagonal for the light squared bishop. For example, if they capture the pawn with their pawn, it would simply be checkmate. And I assure you, my friends, it wouldn't be the first time I've delivered a checkmate like this. So, for example, they have to capture with the bishop. It's obvious, right? With the knight, they don't want to stop defending this point that's being heavily supported. In this case, we've lost a pawn, but that's the least of our worries. We're being active with our pieces. Now it's time for our other bishop, the dark squared one, to come into play. So what does that mean? That we have this knight pinned. Dummo. We have this knight that's defending the other one, also pinned. Pinned here, pinned there. Now this is a real pin, not like the one our opponent tried to pull off. There's no way out of this position, for example, no matter what they do. Let's say, for example, we make the move. I'm just making this up. Knight takes knight. I'm doing this without thinking too much, because now they can't capture with the king because of the bishop. They can't capture with the queen because of the bishop, and they can't capture with the knight because then we take the queen. So here, we'd already have the game very much in our favor, since we'd be up a piece. So in this video, I want to show you that a lot of times when someone pins us, we get scared. But really, what they're doing is a bad idea. And we can counterattack in a super strong way. I hope all this knowledge has been useful to you. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like if you found this helpful. It's totally free and it really supports me a lot. So if I see that this video gets a lot of likes, I'll make more videos like this, so you can keep learning more and more every day. So I hope you loved this video, and I'll see you tomorrow, as always, in another chess video, friends. Goodbye.